It's Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. From Altair to IBM, A History of the PC Revolution. By Stan Veit, Editor-in-Chief Emeritus, Computer Shopper. Copyright 1993 and 2025 by Stan Veit and A-Books Creativity Incorporated. Read by Randy Kindig and David Greelish. Chapter 14. TI-99 4A, the computer that refused to die. Texas Instruments, the semiconductor giant, had lagged behind Intel and Motorola in the development of microprocessors, concentrating on the production of memory chips and calculator chips, in which field they were first in the world. Texas Instruments' calculator division had engaged in a worldwide price war in which they had destroyed or crippled the competition for all time. They had brought the price of a four-banger calculator from over $100 to under $10 and added refinements while they were doing it. The Texas Instruments labs had been engaged in R&D to flank the CPU makers by producing a superior microprocessor. The TMS-9900 was the result, a 16-bit CPU with advanced features and supported by a family of peripheral chips that provided graphics and fast mathematic processing. The first application of the TMS-9900 was in the Texas Instruments line of mini-computers, which were marketed to compete with Digital Equipment's PDP-11 line of computers and Data General's Micronova. These were moderately successful, but the field was small and largely dominated by DEC and Data General.
What Texas Instruments was looking for was a large volume consumer product. Tandy, Radio Shack, and Commodore seemed to be on the crest of a new wave of electronic products called home computers, and Texas Instruments was determined to repeat their calculator success in this field with a much superior system. Their philosophy was completely different from that of other manufacturers. They meant to control the system completely. The design of their home computer would include color, and programming would be in a proprietary language that would be loaded into read-only memory, or ROM. The ROM chips would be mounted in plug-in cartridges, which would be sold to the computer owners. Software developers would have to buy the cartridges from Texas Instruments and program them. Texas Instruments would only license specific software developers, and they did not envision much competition among them.
The TI-99-4, introduced in 1980, was Texas Instruments' contender for the home computer market. It used a 16-bit TMS-9900 running in an 8-bit bus for economy. One of the first places it was shown was at the Personal Computer Show in Boston. I had closed the Computer Mart and was looking for a new business to go into, so I took the shuttle to Boston to attend the show and see the TI-99-4. It was a low silver keyboard with ports for plug-in cartridges and a color monitor. The quality of the graphics and color impressed me, and I felt that this computer system had possibilities. The listed price was $1,200, which I felt was rather high for a product for the home. I was told that the unit also included BASIC and could support a cassette recorder, so the owner did not only have to rely on cartridges, but could learn to write his own programs. In addition, there would be a cartridge to load the simple integer BASIC in the machine and another containing advanced BASIC for more extensive programs and additional memory to support it.
When I left the hall to catch my return flight, I met a Texas Instruments salesman who had tried to enroll our store as a dealer for their advanced line of calculators. We shared a cab and sat together on the flight. I told him of my interest in the TI-99-4, and he asked me if I wanted to become a dealer. No, I said, I'm out of the retail business, but I am interested in developing software for the machine. He told me that Texas Instruments had exclusive contracts with large experienced firms to develop cartridges. They would not just sell the cartridges to anyone. However, I was free to develop basic programs which could be loaded from cassettes. All I had to do was apply to Texas Instruments for a license and pay them royalties. They would then give me information regarding the GPL, or graphics programming language, and color system. The catch was that there was only 16K of RAM memory in the basic computer, not enough to write any meaningful software. It was definitely not an open system.
In the face of competition from Commodore, Radio Shack, and Atari 400 and 800, the TI-99-4 was a huge flop. Texas Instruments pulled it back and started a redesign. They included a new motherboard known as the Q, quality improved, that used a smaller number of chips. The result was the TI-99-4A, which was a very improved machine that could be sold at a competitive price. They eliminated the color monitor and included a TV interface. They improved the keyboard and added more memory in the basic machine. The new computers were to be sold through department mass market stores and mass market stores for about $450. The new machines started to sell and gained a group of devoted fans. Then a problem with the power supply caused Texas Instruments to hold all TI-99-4As until it was solved. During that time, Commodore introduced the VIC-20 for $300 and the C64 for $595 and launched a big promotion for the C64. By the time the TI-99-4A could resume selling, Commodore had launched a price war when they introduced the VIC-20 for less than $300. Texas Instruments responded by offering a $100 rebate on the TI-99-4A for Christmas 1982.
The Commodore had several things that people liked better than the TI-99-4A. First, there was much more software available and it cost less. Second, it was easy to add Commodore's floppy disk. All you had to do was plug it in. The operating system was built right into the disk drive. To expand a TI-99-4A required a large and expensive expansion module, plus the drive unit. Texas Instruments had never expected that everyone would want a disk drive. Atari responded to Texas Instruments' rebate by offering rebates on their Model 400 and 800 computers. Texas Instruments came back and extended their rebates until April, plus giving away free speech synthesizers to customers who bought quantities of software.
By the start of 1983, Commodore started selling C64s to discount mass merchants for resale at less than $400. They also sold VIC-20s at $150. Texas Instruments responded by cutting $48 off the 99-4A price. Commodore cut further, and the price of VIC-20 went under $100 if the customer bought some software or other peripherals. Texas Instruments talked about meeting the cut later in the spring. Commodore's next salvo was a trade-in rebate of $100 on any computer or video game the customer brought in, even if it didn't work. People bought broken Sinclairs for $10 and got a $100 off a C64, which they could take home for $300. Dealers started giving VIC-20s away if the customer bought peripherals and software.
The coup de grace took place at the 1983 Spring Consumer Electronics Show, or CES, in Chicago, when Commodore announced they had cut the dealer price on the C64 to $200. This would allow discounts to sell the C64 as low as $200 to $230. Then they announced a cut in their software prices, taking the last high-profit item away from Texas Instruments. Thanks to perfected design and Jack Tramiel's business acumen and Sig Hartman's sharp dealing with software vendors, Commodore's cost on a C64 was less than $100. They had been making money on both hardware and software while running Texas Instruments into the ground.
The debacle at the CES was the last straw for Bill Turner, president of Texas Instruments' consumer division. His accountants told him that they would lose $100 million in the second quarter of 1983, and that was too much even for the giant Texas Instrument Corporation. Bill Turner resigned, and on the fateful October 13th Black Friday, Texas Instruments announced they were ending production of the TI-99-4A home computer. However, that was not the end of the story. The inventory of TI-99-4A computers was dumped on the market at prices as low as $50. This gave thousands of people the opportunity to own a computer who had not previously been able to afford one, and created a large and dedicated hobbyist user population who organized into user survival groups.
The period from 1982 to 1983 was an intensive period of TI-99-4A support. Publishers brought out hundreds of books on the computer, and software development was at a peak. Most general computer magazines carried articles on the TI, and the company supported the computer with peripherals and software. The production death of the TI-99 4A brought on a peculiar situation. The dumping of the hardware at way below cost prices created a huge group of users who wanted books, software, and support. While Texas Instruments did not provide it, small supporting companies grew by selling what the new users demanded. User groups grew and became bastions of loyal TI support. Software continued to be developed and circulated within the group.
At the time Texas Instruments pulled the plug on the TI-99 4A, they had been working on the TI-99 8, which was known as the Apple Killer. This advanced machine used an improved TMS 9995 display chip and had UCSD Pascal and ROM. It also had a new rewritten BASIC interpreter and was 10 times faster than the TI-99 4A. However, in spite of the fact that hundreds of loyal users were waiting for the machine and 100 pre-production models were made, Texas Instruments pulled the plug prior to the 1983 Summer Consumer Electronics Show.
The death of the TI-99 4A had an extremely bad effect on the overall position of Texas Instruments as a manufacturer of general purpose and memory chips. The home computer production lines gave Texas Instruments a base on which to plan production of chips and to achieve economies of scale. With that gone, Texas Instruments had a difficult time competing against the Japanese. The user groups continued on Genie, CompuServe, and Delphi with support of some small software and hardware companies. One company, MyArc, brought out the Geneve 9940, which was supposed to be the successor to the 99.8. While it did attract some users, it could not compete with the attraction of the PC clones and the Mac. However, 10 years after the official demise of the TI-99 4A, a sizable user community continues to use and support the computer that will not die.
So, of course, the book was published in 1993. So,
Right.
and Stan's saying the computer that will not die. So I guess it still did have a somewhat strong little community around it at that point.
It does. It did, and it still does today. I mean, there are a
Mhm.
lot of loyal
Oh
TI
yeah, in the
fans out
collector's
there.
market.
Yeah.
Uh, did you did you ever consider buying one or no?
I did. I actually wanted, that was the machine that I longed for and wanted back when I was looking to buy a home computer. I got my TRS-80 Model 1, and then I knew the TI was going to come out, and I was a big fan of their calculator, programmable calculator line. I had a 58C, and so I really wanted to get the TI color computer when it came out. Unfortunately, it came out in 1980. I remember when it came out,
Hmm.
and it was too expensive. I mean, it was pricey, and part of it was because it was a whole package. You had to buy the monitor with it, and
Yeah,
and the whole deal. But it was more than I could afford, just starting out in the work market, I guess, at that time.
I wish I had heard about that $50 deal. I probably could have. I don't know where I was in my life, but I bet you I could have scraped up $50 maybe.
I think that's why today you can still very easily find boxed TI-99 4As because a lot of people bought those.
And then stuck them
Um,
away. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
And
Didn't
that
even,
makes me think of like other computers that sort of happened to off the top of my head was Commodore had one. And do you remember that one? It's not the Commodore 16, but another sort of smaller. I remember seeing it advertised on TV for like $99, maybe
well, they
84
had
or
the
something
Commodore Max.
or something.
Um,
Yeah. But then there also the Coleco Atom, ended up being, marked way, way down. And I remember seeing them in the toy store. I think they were still
mhm,
like 299, which was pretty cheap, but I didn't have the money to get one even then.
yeah.
But tell us about, so you contacted Bill Turner one
I
time.
did back when I was doing a whole series of podcasts about the TI-99
Hmm.
on Floppy days. I contacted Bill Turner. I found out he was still around, and he actually responded. And I was a little surprised. I really, really wanted to get an interview with him to for the history portion
Yeah.
of the podcast. But after going back and forth with him a few times, he decided the memory was too painful,
Wow.
and decided he didn't want to talk about it.
Isn't that
So I
something?
couldn't get, yeah. I wish I
Um,
could have gotten him to talk about it because that it would have been really interesting to hear it from his perspective, being the
yeah.
president of the personal computer division as he was.
But there'll be, lots of good notes here in the show notes. So you've done quite a few, what, one, two, three, four, five different episodes and interviews are, right? All interviews? Yeah, on floppy days with different people from TI. Right?
Yeah, yeah, I had a whole
Oh, TI
series.
emulation, one of them. And
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so yeah, that was fun. I really learned a lot about the TI-99 by talking with people who are well known even yet today in the TI-99 community.
I recently acquired one. I've had a few. I haven't really ever, didn't own one originally. Haven't known that much about them. Had a friend that had one and played on it just one time. Um, but I've owned a couple here and there, but never did much with it, so kind of ignorant, I guess, a little bit, other than
It's
the
pretty
story, basic
easy.
story.
It's still pretty easy to acquire one at a
Hmm.
pretty low price
Yeah.
because um, I don't know. I guess they just because of all the ones that they dumped on the market. I think again a lot of people bought those and just tucked them away, and it's pretty easy to find a boxed one at a very reasonable price, probably for $100 or less.
So I added a couple of notes. They'll be in the show notes, of course. And about, I know there's a story. So there's a link here to a Spectrum IEEE article about the history of the transistor. Because I remember, that I think the history of that was just celebrated, or I'm trying to get to the webpage now. But the basic story is, Shockley and it's a shame the other two other guys. I don't. Do you remember their name?
I
Tenenbaum.
I
But
I
there's a great
don't.
article here. So basically, the team at or were they at Texas? No, at Bell Laboratories. Oh, led the team. All right. In the beginning, Gordon Teal, far left, directed the development of the silicon transistor at Texas Instruments. William Shockley led the team at Bell Telephone Laboratories. Okay, to develop the very first transistor. But TI silicon device with its three long leads became famous, making the Texas upstart the sole supplier of silicon transistors. So anyway, read some more if you like, but that's basically, TI was very important in development of transistor. Uh, by the way, CES in Las Vegas is happening right now as we record this. So, because
Oh, it is.
it's mentioned in the story, so I thought that was kind of interesting. Um,
Hmm.
it kind of wasn't that relevant anymore. It seemingly for a while, and now I think it's kind of a little bit more relevant, maybe because of AI and the robots and all that stuff. And there's only one, if I'm not mistaken, there's only one a year now, where there used to be multiple ones. But that's outside our.
I haven't really kept up with what's going on with CES.
And another note I put is the story mentioned the TI-99 8. And I was, I've read this book at one point or more than once in the past, but I forgot all about that. But have you ever heard anything about like seeing one of those or any of those out in the wild?
There are very few people that have them. I have not, I don't believe, ever seen one in real life, even though I've been to a lot of shows. They're pretty rare.
Yeah,
So
that's maybe worth some
yeah,
money, right? Or it'd be interesting to see
yeah,
one.
yeah, it sure would. I don't know. I don't recall. I'm sure at the time that I did the TI-99 stuff on floppy days that we talked about the 99.8, but I don't remember what the improvements were, over the 4A.
I'll try to find a good link. I did a quick search, and this is on 99er.net. But like, here's a picture of one that TI Chips user group member Steve Eggers. Oh, it belonged to him, and it was on loan to the group that put it on display at the 1996 Cleveland Mug, which was 30 years ago. But I'm assuming that one's floating around somewhere, maybe. So,
I've almost had a TI-99 4 a couple of times. I've had
and I've seen
uh,
those.
yeah, and they're fairly rare and difficult to get as well, not near as much as the 99.8. but it would just be for curiosity's sake because it wasn't as they just made a lot of improvements with the 4A that made it a better machine.
Oh, and so also to mention, maybe you know something about this. So I think, they're the silver ones as described here, right? And then
Hmm.
there's like 10 99 4As, or was that the fours that were 10? Or do you happen offhand, have you ever seen one of
Oh,
those where they're not silver
yeah, the white ones
or white? Yeah.
are what he referred to as the Q or the
Uh,
quality improved ones.
oh, okay.
So later on they came out with the Q model, which
Okay.
was
Yeah.
it was cost reduced for them to make them. And
Right. Right. And that's what those are.
yeah, yeah, and
So,
I have a white one and a
so
silver and
silver is
black
more
one.
expensive, huh?
Yeah, it is because it's got a more desirable look to it. And actually, some of the early Qs, I don't know if
Hmm.
you know this,
Mm-mm.
were actually crippled so that you couldn't run some of the cartridge software, unless the cartridge was um, made or done through TI. The cartridge wouldn't necessarily run on that Q model of machine. You know how
Wow.
Stan talked about how TI tried to control,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
whole the software side of things, and that was one of their attempts to do so.
I'm gonna try to find. I know we briefly talked about this before recording, but like I know there's stories about like the processor that it had so much more potential, but it was kind of, for lack of a better word, crippled in the way it was implemented. I know they mentioned how it was on an 8-bit bus in the four, so maybe that's what that's all about. But maybe I can find an article about that and I'll put it in the show notes. But actually, obviously, they did that early on with in the Intel world with uh, the 286, right? And the 386, the early 386s, and where they took basically the earliest or the cheaper 386s. Remember, they were essentially put on 286 motherboards. So you had this full
Was that
processor on a 16-bit motherboard, I think, is what they.
was that the SX
Yeah,
version? Because I remember there was a 386 SX.
exactly. And that was like a more cost reduced way of getting into a
Hmm.
386.
That was actually my first IBM machine, compatible was a 386 SX.
Yeah, and then the DX, of course, was full 32-bit implementation.
Right.
And then, not to be confused with the 486 DXSX, which all that was is they crippled the coprocessor, the math coprocessor on the 486, thus giving you
Hmm.
the S. But we don't need, we don't need to get into all that. That's
Yeah,
down
but
the road.
you brought up a good point, though. It's an odd processor in this
Mhm.
machine. It's not the 6502, which most machines have, or a Z80.
Yeah,
It's so if you already learned to program in assembly language on some other machine, that's not going to translate to doing so on the TI-99.
yeah.
And
So,
the graphics are a little weird on it too.
yeah,
Um,
I think to me, they struck me, if my memory serves me right, that they were a little more premium, not premium, but primitive, for the time. Where Atari and Commodore were already doing a little bit better. They seem more like, Atari 800 and Commodore 64 seem more arcade quality graphics, where the TI was more like Atari 2600 kind of blocky. I don't know. I could be wrong though.
yeah, yeah, and I think that's because the Atari and the Commodore had chips, graphics
Yeah,
chips built
right.
into them to handle the graphics, and I'm not sure that's the case with the TI-99.
And then I also list, when I did the History of Personal Computing podcast. Jeff and I, we did an episode, just a kind of basic overview episode. There's a link to a TI-994A web emulator, and there's other emulators, and you can find out at that website too, the js99er.net. And also a link to the TI-994A listed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. So
Is that actually a 4A or is it a 4? You
oh,
would think it would be
oh, are
I
you are
think
you
it'd be
looking
a
at it?
4.
Let's
No,
see.
I'm not. I would just
Oh, yeah, it looks like a 4A. Yep.
it
Yep,
is a
it is.
4A.
Uh-huh. So it gets some respect. I'm looking to go there maybe this year, go to Washington, D.C. We'll see. But
Oh,
that brings us to the.
do
Go
you
ahead.
typically go every year?
No, no,
Oh,
no. The last time I've been a few times in my life, and the last time I went, it had to be close to 10 years ago, I think. Maybe a little bit longer than that. So our next chapter is 15, of course, and it's called Look to the North Star. So that should be very
be interesting.
interesting. A little bit step back into the S100
It is.
world.
It is.
That's kind of
Yeah.
interesting that he put it in that order.
Yeah, I wonder why he did that, because the others seem to be more ordered.
Yeah.
But you're right. He takes a step back in time.
So, all right. Until then.
All right. Talk to you
Happy
then.
New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy New
Happy
Year
New
to
Year,
all the
everyone.
listeners.